Yeah, definitely. So my name is Jacob Niedzwiecki. I'm a choreographer, filmmaker, and programmer. I started dancing when I was about 4, and I started programming when I was about 7, and I never really gave up either of them.
Yeah.
um, I had a career as a, I had a career as a professional ballet dancer, but a short career as a professional
Mhm.
ballet dancer. And then moved into making my own work. Um,
Where were you
the
based, or where are you based right now?
I'm based in Toronto.
Uh huh.
Yeah, which has a really, really great dance scene, a lot of amazing festivals,
Yeah.
a lot of performing opportunities,
Yeah.
and Montreal and Toronto are so close to each other, and they're both really great dance hubs.
Yeah.
So I spend some time in both. This is actually my second time in Berlin, but it's my first time in Berlin for work.
Uh huh.
The first time I ever came to Berlin was for my honeymoon.
That's great.
um, So I'm here in Berlin with a selection of people from a team that I work with,
Hmm.
and the performance we create is called Jacqueries,
Hmm.
or if you're a francophone, Jacquerie.
Jacques.
Um, and Jacqueries really came out of a lot of thinking that I did about um, mobile technology, especially. And about site-specific and location-based performance or in situ performance. And the main thing that preoccupied me was I've seen so many amazing site-specific or location-based performances, um, but a really good in situ performance is by definition kind of impossible to tour or to travel or to give to other audiences. So point of view of I think a lot about accessibility. I think a lot about how to invite people to my work and to make it easy for more people to participate or to see work. And so in situ performance is very difficult to think about making accessible.
Hmm.
Um, and so I started thinking about ways that it might be possible to do that. And so how Jacqueries works is that we have a custom app that I programmed. The first version we did in 2012, and it gets better every time we do it. So we have a custom app. The idea of which is to take all of the technology that we have access to as creators in a theater, so sound cueing, video projection, communication between crew and dancers,
Hmm.
timing things, to take all of that technology and wrap it up and put it in the audience and performers' pockets so
Hmm.
that we can go wherever we want and still have a really immersive and specific experience.
Hmm.
So Jacqueries is about an hour long, and the audience follows performers in small groups, all through a city. So we go through
Hmm.
backwards, through rooftops,
Nice.
through really fancy places, through really less fancy areas, and scenes take place all throughout the city. All at the same time, we've got an original score synchronized for everybody over headphones.
Hmm.
We've got videos cued and playing on screen at certain points,
Hmm.
and we use augmented reality
Hmm.
to do essentially what is often done in a theater context with projection in
Hmm.
terms of
Nice.
imagery or overlays or things like that.
Yeah.
We use augmented reality for.
That's beautiful. So that means that you are conflating, augmented reality technology with geolocated performance, and then the possibility of distributing all the cues and the narrative, kind of
Yeah,
synchronize the narrative.
yeah.
That's that's really great. And how do you do this? Because then I see it, of course. If I see it from above, I can see motion, I can see choreographic thinking or some kind of patterns. And how do you see? Do you relate this as a dance performance, or conceive it as a that, or have a broader perspective of the
Do you
theater
mean
event?
uh, from whose perspective? From an audience member, or from a passerby, or from
No, I
me as
think
the
that
creator?
sometimes when we see a site-specific dance, and then you have dance-like movements being done. So, so you
Yeah.
know what I
Okay.
mean. So it's do you have dance as a core part of your language, or that it is a much
I see what
more,
you're saying.
let's say, theatrical umbrella event
I
in
think
which,
I think for me, like I come from the dance world.
yeah,
I'm a choreographer. I'm not a playwright.
okay,
I'm not a writer.
yeah, yeah,
So the core of it is really dance, and the piece does have a narrative, and we
yeah,
do use movement to convey that narrative, but we also use sound and a lot of other things.
yeah.
I think, but your question around sort of like how do we describe it?
Yeah, no, no. I think that perhaps that's exactly, because I have a very broad perspective of what dance is.
Yeah,
Of course, I think you have a lot of people moving around doing a
absolutely.
pathway, and that can be a choreography. But then
And actually,
yeah,
I should talk about that in a few minutes because there's another project that is a little more like that.
yeah,
That uses a lot of the same code. But I think the interesting part for me about Jackeries is as a choreographer, it took a lot of work to find a vocabulary
yeah,
that could survive on the street, that could work in a parking lot, that could work in a fire escape, that could work. You
yeah,
don't have the luxury of creating your own world in this context. We have to work with the world we find in the cities we are. We've now done this in Toronto twice, and we've toured it to Miami.
uh-huh,
We're not doing the full performance here in Berlin,
uh-huh,
but you sort of have to find I often make, like, I've made very classical pieces, I've made very contemporary pieces, but I don't know that you can make a classical piece that works in a parking lot unless the whole point is to be like the exact opposite.
yeah,
So for vocabulary, the piece was actually really inspired by a lot of training that I did in parkour.
uh-huh. Nice.
And
Of course.
which is all about finding interesting pathways
Yeah.
through open spaces.
Beautiful.
And so that really inspired a lot of the ideas of how we move the audience through the space, and it inspired a lot of the movement vocabulary.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good. I think that that perfect, perhaps metaphorical or mappings, of a practice that is fully urban. Not it's like about traversing spaces, and then you have the geolocation distributed aspect. That I think that's really kind of a good fit. Nice.
Yeah, I think the parkour element comes through all the way through the piece, even to how we made it. Because when we first started making it, we were working guerrilla style, and without permission in some of the because we were testing out the idea, right? So we were and we didn't have audience with us.
Yeah.
So we were working very, very undercover.
Yeah.
And I learned how to do that by training by parkour training, because you learn how long to stay in one spot. You learn how to scout. You learn how to it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
And the piece actually has the piece also has some strong ties with graffiti, because for augmented reality we need an image. We need an image to anchor on. Yeah. And so graffiti became a big part of the piece. So in each city that we do it, or each location that we do it, there's a scene where we essentially create a new scene based on a certain piece of graffiti.
Nice. Yeah.
And that's
it's graffiti that is found. You found the interface. You find the graffiti as a trigger.
Yeah, it works very nicely.
Yeah.
We try and, when it's possible, we try and who did the piece.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of there's not rules, ethics. There's conventions or etiquette in the graffiti world, just as there are, and in the hip hop world, just as there is in any artistic community. And so
yeah, that's great. So then how do you connect this then with all the, if we can backtrack a little bit, with the rest of your work? I think that what I really like is this kind of conceptual displacement of dance towards parkour as a movement form, whatever. And then the technology, there's really clear mapping of the technology, of the affordances of the technology, what the technology affords.
Right.
And then the political aspect of even the urban practice there's urban practices, but then can be this
Yeah.
layer of the urban practice that is a performance happening with what already it had come from the city. So anyway, I'm just paraphrasing a bunch of stuff that you said. So then
No, and it comes in. Sorry, go ahead.
So like how then you related with your work and whatever, if it has been a continuity or it's a rupture, etc.
I think, I do a lot of work in collaboration as well. So I do video design for other choreographers, like projection design for choreographers. And actually, in the last year or two, I've been really lucky, and I've worked the code framework that I built for Jackeries. From the very beginning, I wanted to make sure that it was accessible to other creators.
Nice.
Because I think as a tool, there's tons of people have done walking through cities works. Like Janet Cardiff in Canada,
Last Theory,
Rimini Protocol. Like this is not a new idea, and even Promenade, like you could call it, Jackeries is essentially like Promenade style.
Yeah.
And so that's not a new idea in the slightest. So it was important to me to think about how can I not just use this technology or this tool for my own work, but how can it be, what would other people do with it? Because there's so much interesting creative potential.
Yeah.
So in the last 2 years, I've been able to work as a creative technologist or interactive designer with a couple of other choreographers, all based in Toronto so far. And so that resulted in an augmented reality piece in a museum that was really interesting, very architecturally inspired. And then also in a very neat project with a dancer, former dancer and choreographer named Peggy Baker, who's very famous in Canada, trained in New York, danced with the Lara Lubavitch company for years. And that piece is it's a participatory work that's designed called Flux Deluxe, and it was inspired by a movement workshop that Peggy was giving, which is essentially guides a group of people in generating spontaneous choreography. And Peggy had a particular interest in making sure that this workshop was accessible to people using motorized wheelchairs or manual wheelchairs, because her thinking was, we should be able to dance together. Basically, we should be able to move together. There shouldn't be separations between us. And so with Flux Deluxe, we basically only use the sound capability. We only use the sound doing capability. But we designed essentially movement scores that are designed not for dancers, but for civilians, non-professional dancers.
Yeah.
And so we designed scores that maybe like 5 or 10 minutes long that guide people in coordinated but also partly improvised patterns of movement. So we've done this. We've had probably up to 40 people at once, and as few as 2. But everybody's wearing headphones, and everybody participates according to these very simple rules. So that's essentially an example of algorithmic choreography or generative choreography. So that's one of those examples of somebody coming up with a totally different idea for using this same tool. I'm working towards, hopefully this summer, an open source release of the cohort framework, which is what I'm calling this particular framework of sort of queuing and glue code. So I think Jackeries fits in with my other work in the sense that it's when I'm doing Jackeries, I am leading a team, and so it gets to be it always includes all of my disciplines. Like it includes movement and media and code, and I get to have my fingers in all of those different areas. As a collaborator, sometimes I'm focused on the code, sometimes I'm focused on the media, sometimes I'm focused on the movement, but it's really nice to have those opportunities.
Yes. No, that's great.
Focus, and sometimes you go wide.
Yes. There's something happening here outside. Hold on.
Don't worry.
That's it. It's the wind. It's the wind because I lived in the woods. So then, how this would look, you know? Um, for example, there is an app that people download and put in their smartphones. There would be a moment that people would say, "Hey, boom!" I get a ping or a message saying,
Yeah.
"The show is starting. Go out somewhere or whatever." So how that a message? How that would that work?
That's actually so one of the biggest challenges and learning experiences that we've had is around essentially front of house and giving the audience a sense of what to expect. When you work outside of a theater, I'll never forget the first time we did Jackeries. I made the production schedule with my stage manager, and I said, "Well, we're not in a theater.
Yeah.
We're not working in a theater, so we don't really need that much tech time. We don't have lighting. You know, like what do you do in a theater? You spend 90% of your time screwing around with lights and setting cues and everything." So I said, "We're not in a theater. We're not using a theater. We don't need tech time." No, the lesson is if you're not working in a theater, you need more tech time because I think it's partly about unbundling what a theater gives you as a creator. So we don't need a building, but we still need something like a lobby. We still need something like ushers. We still need something like, we still pay so much attention to sight lines. So when you leave, like the theater gives you a bundled set of conventions, expectations, technologies. And when you step out of that as a choreographer, as a creator, you can do a lot of work around, okay, so how am I thinking about sight lines in a stairwell? But the thing that's easy to miss is that the audience loses a lot too. The audience loses the audience loses a lot of comfort. When somebody goes to a theater, they know the rules. So with Jackeries, we've evolved it to a place where it's if we're on tour, first of all, if we're on tour, up until now we haven't been able to offer it for download if we're on tour. Because for a long time the App Store had a 1 to 2 week approval time. And so if you're on tour and you're landing on Monday, we're filming stuff on Wednesday, we're opening night on Friday, there's no way we can turn around a release and get it pushed out to the App Store. So on tour, we use devices that we supply. But it's basically you come in, you get checked in, you get a device, you get a pair of headphones, and we split the audience into 4 groups, which makes it a lot more manageable and lets us also sort of respect the natural capacity of spaces because we have some scenes that take place out in the open, maybe up to 40 people could watch those. We have other scenes that take place in very small spaces, and so that creates sort of a flexible continuum for us of scenes that the whole audience is watching together versus scenes that are for maybe 4 or 5 people versus scenes that are maybe for 1 person. And of course, a huge inspiration there was Sleep No More with that diversity of experience.
That's really nice. Yes. So, well, this is very interesting. I think that I'm happy that you were one of the, also the selected artists. It feels like it's a very kind of pushing the envelope of what is the theater. One of the things that I always was struggling, it was just how bounded it was. The idea of dance and technology, even the idea of site specificity, I think is extremely limiting. So then it's like how
it's always like one site. It's always there's a room in a museum or there's a cool spot. For me with Jackeries, it was about there's in any given pick 4 blocks of a city. There's so many interesting spaces within that. There's and the transitions between them are as interesting as the spaces themselves. So walking, there's one place in Toronto that really inspired this because within maybe if you walk half a kilometer, a 5-minute walk, you go through an underground industrial space, a retail mall with Abercrombie and Fitch stores, a hotel, a parking garage, a tiny park hidden in the city, and these places just happen like one after another. So you're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
it feels very cinematic. You're just sort of
Yeah.
like cutting from one location to another.
Yeah. No, like
So
I think that that's this is very important. I think for the Berlin in a way. Berlin is a really, as you may realize, it's a very interesting place of the many uh, dilapidated areas, like the vastness or the fragmentation, the wounds, the different histories that it has. So, well, I wish you the best with this. I hope to.
thank you so much, and we are just so honored. We are very, very, very honored to have been selected for this.
Yeah.
The chance to have to spend time in an amazing facility,
Yeah.
the ability to bring my team members with me.
Yeah.
We were just so this morning we were just in the studio doing, and we got our first 3D capture done.
Yeah.
And like it was so lovely because I suddenly needed an LED light,
Yeah.
and there was an LED light, and
Yeah.
and it was just it was
That's
this moment of
beautiful.
like, oh, it's nice to work in a studio. It's nice to work in somewhere that actually has all the things I might need
Yeah.
within
No.
our. So we've been thrilled to be here.
Yeah, Marcela will be happy to hear this because that
Oh.
has been one of the main struggles. How can we call ourselves a place for creation and not technology if we actually were kind of building the resources? So one of the things that I feel, okay, just a curiosity,
Yeah.
how are you doing the capture, the motion, the 3D capture?
So we're using the hardware side of it is like most other people. We're using a Kinect V2.
Yeah. Okay.
But the software side of it is really interesting. We're working with a New York startup called DepthKit,
Uh-huh.
and they grew out of a team that made a tool called RGBD Toolkit,
Mhm.
which was an open frameworks tool, and now they're sort of building it out as a real post production tool. So like they're looking at reaching levels of reliability and reaching a certain smoothness of workflow.
Okay.
So that's been a huge piece because I did Kinect captures for a short film 6 years ago. It's not a new tool,
Yeah.
but the software side of it and the ability to align, the ability to basically use a DSLR to capture video and a Kinect to capture depth, and then combine those two
Yeah.
and get them out to something like Unity for VR or AR.
Yeah.
That's a huge piece of the puzzle that has really been missing so far. So
That's really great. Well, thank you so much, and
thank you.
so I hope to see you either there or in this other side of the Atlantic, and
Definitely.
just enjoy.
All right. Thank you so much, Marlon.
Thank you.